Thank you. Good evening, everyone. John Townsend, Deputy Town Administrator and Director of Finance. We're here at Natick 101. We're at the Finance Department session. Now, before I can actually formally introduce myself, I do have a couple of housekeeping measures to take into account. So let's get started here. If we can move to the agenda. Just going to quickly... Okay, we'll change things up on me. We now have the QR code in case you'd like to ask a question during the event. Do we have to leave this up on the screen for them to? Nope. Okay. It's there. Please utilize that and we'll get your question up. Just with regards to questions, if you do have a question that is regarding any of the actual presentation, please feel free to let me know and I'll clarify anything. If you have more detailed sort of questions or questions with regards to other issues that I don't actually raise in this presentation, please hold on to those at the end. We'll be going on for about an hour and then we'll have another half an hour for question and answer period. So let's start with the agenda. This is going to be a very high-level review of the finance department. So we're not going to get too much into the weeds. I'm going to save that for a Natick 202. But we're going to just stay and talk a lot about the structure of the finance department. I promise you, will give you some numbers. Everyone likes to have numbers in their finance presentations, so we'll have those for you, but we're going to start off with an introduction to the organization, sort of go through how the finance department is set up, and then we thought we'd take you on a little journey of your tax dollar. We're going to take that out of your pocket, and we're going to run it through the finance department and see where it ends up. And then while we're doing that, we're going to take a little closer look at the divisions in the finance department and give you a little more background with regards to what they do. And then, as I mentioned, finally, the final 30 minutes will be a question and answer session that you can ask any questions you like about the finances of the town of Natick. So we're going to talk about the introduction of organization. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself once again, John Townsend, Deputy Town Administrator and Director of Finance. I've been in Natick for about 8 years, I think now. At the right-hand side of the slide there, you're going to see a picture of me. That's what I looked like before I got to Natick. And now you can take the comparison of what happens to you after 8 years of working in Natick. The other thing I'd like to sort of point a little bit about there is that I am actually an attorney by training. And so if you do feel like you're part of a jury and I'm arguing things to you, that's probably the reason why. But otherwise... under the Deputy Town Administrator of Finance, we have the Finance and Administration and Budget Office, and that actually is two individuals. And the first one she's actually seated in the audience here, Tien Wee, who is the Assistant Director of Finance, my number 2. Does a lot of work with regards to our policies and procedures and our systems in the finance department. And then the other individual in the finance office is Gloria Wong. She is responsible for these lovely slides that you're going to be seeing tonight. She does, of course, also responsible for putting the budget together. And in addition to it, she provides a lot of analysis for us when we go out to debt and putting together our debt packages for our capital items. So that's the Finance, Administration, and Budget Office. The other 3 divisions of the Finance Department, first of all, is the assessors. If you sort of look at the organization chart there, you'll see the Board of Assessors sort of above that. They provide some guidance and oversight with regards to the assessor and how we do assessing in the town of Natick. We are very fortunate to actually have the assessor, the Director of Assessing, Eric Henderson, with us this evening. So he'll give you a little overview regarding the assessing office as well as how he goes about assessing your property. That should be exciting. Next, we're talking about the comptroller. That's Michelle Larimore. Unfortunately, she cannot be here with us this evening. We'll talk a little bit about how she maintains the books for the town and does things like the audit and other AP, payroll, with regards to their functionality in the finance department. And then finally, of course, not least, is the collector and treasurer's office. We're actually going to start off with them after we do the assessor's office, talking a little bit about how we collect the funds to run the town. Just a brief note with regards to the sort of core values that we sort of try to aspire to in the finance department. First of all is efficiency. We're always looking at how we can do things more efficiently with regards to processing both the bills as well as the other transactions in the finance department. We're going to give you a little bit of some of the numbers of what we actually run through our department. It's actually quite staggering. Accountability, of course, the accountability with regards to the finances does rest with the finance department. Make sure everything is accurate and correct. And then finally, we do try the best and pride ourselves actually in our customer service. Understand that, collecting taxes, paying taxes is not everyone's favorite thing to do. So therefore, we do realize that we need to provide a little bit of extra customer service with regards to making sure that people understand why it is we collect taxes, how we collect taxes, and the assistance that we can provide them if necessary. And also have some numbers with regards to that as well to provide a little scope behind the customer service part of the department. So moving on. So just a quick slide with regards to the structures and the interactions of the department. I like to sort of liken us to a chain, in that each link as part of the finance, the assessors, the collector treasurer, the comptroller, and the finance administrator are linked together. We all rely upon each other to make certain that we can actually do our own jobs, and also help out other folks with regards to providing good customer service to the residents of Natick. Also, in the little boxes around the particular chain, we have sort of our interaction, our connections with other agencies and other departments of the town. First of all, we got boards and committees. We provide a lot of information to, interact a lot with. First of all, the finance committee. Every budget season, we spend a lot of time with the finance committee. Other boards, the select board, we provide a lot of information to the select board, presentations of the select board with regard to the status of the finances of the town. There's an audit advisory committee, which is actually a committee of the select board that we also interact a lot with regards to our audits of the town. Of course, other town departments play a big role in the finance of the town. First off, we'll go over a little bit with regards to development of the budget. They are, of course, the key players in the development of the budget, finding out exactly what the services are going to be provided to the residents and how much of those are going to cost. They also collect a fairly large portion of revenue for us as well, and that has to be turned over to the collector treasurer's office and processed as part of the revenues for the department, as part of the town. Vendors, of course, need to be paid, also need to have contracts processed, need to get set up in the systems, do a lot of work with our vendors. Of course, auditors, we have a third-party auditor. Don't know exactly who that's going to be at the moment. Outside auditing firm to provide an audit of our books on an annual basis. Of course, the school department is probably actually the finance department's largest client, and that we do their payroll for them, we do their AP for them, we do their bookkeeping for them. We spend a lot of time dealing with the finances of the school department. And of course, State Department of Revenue, actually the Division of Local Services, is our sort of oversight state agency for municipal finance for all the towns, but of course the town of Natick. We have to provide annual filings with them. They do review a lot of our work. I'm sure Mr. Henderson will talk a little bit about the review that oversight they have with regards to our assessing and valuation of our properties in Natick. And then finally, of course, there are the residents. That's the reason why we're here. We try to provide as good service with regards to processing their taxes, their concerns, and making certain that the services of the town are funded for their benefit. Let's go on to the next slide. Just quickly, I would like to provide just a quick breakdown with regards to the revenues and the expenses. Just to give you a little bit of a feel for what we're sort of talking about. We're talking about how we process the finances of the town. So the revenues, and this is for FY24, and I would just like to take a second to remind everybody that we pretty much go by the fiscal year. We have a little hard time. We start talking about the calendar year. That's sort of alien to us. The fiscal year runs from July 1st through June 30th. So these are actually for fiscal year 2024 numbers. Total revenues for FY 24 is $194 million. Obviously, the lion's share of that is the tax levy, which made up 74% of all of our revenues. And once again, Mr. Henderson, who's responsible for sending out those bills and assessing the property, is going to give a little more detail with regards to the tax levy of the town. Sort of second up with regards to our revenues is state aid at 9.5%. That's a pretty steady number with regards to the aid the town gets from the state, usually divided into two sort of buckets. First bucket being for education, Chapter 70 monies, and then the other one is for the town. Unfortunately, the state giveth, and the state also taketh away. They also give us assessments as well. So there are benefits they provide to the town, such as mosquito cakes and mosquito spraying and a number of other different items which we must pay for. So you take the 9.5%, have to deduct out the assessments as well. Local receipts, 9.4%. These actually have been increasing actually fairly significantly since the COVID years. Unfortunately, during COVID, the local receipts did not do terribly well because obviously we're all sitting at home and not going out and eating in restaurants or staying in hotels, which are two of the main local option taxes that we do rely upon for local receipts. We had estimated that we would be back up to our pre-COVID times, FY19, by FY26. And actually, we're going to surpass our FY19 levels of local receipts in FY25. So we're doing very well economically. Local receipts is one of those things that we do use as an indicator with regards to how well the town is doing. Obviously, based on the numbers we're seeing from FY24, the town actually is economically doing extremely well. One-time funds at 3.4%. The largest share of the one-time funds, of course, is that thing called free cash. Free cash is a one-time source. You're not actually supposed to use that for operations, what we do, but it's an important part of our budget. Flipping over to the operating side of things, the $183 million. Education and learning, that would be the schools as well as the libraries as well as Keefe Tech, correct? Yes, Keefe Tech, 47% of our budget. The second largest item of our expenditures is our shared expenses. And these are expenses that are shared between the town and the school. The largest number there is with our health care for our staff as well as for our retirees. And that's at about $15 million, I believe. A couple of the other larger items in that bucket are debt service. We do borrow money to maintain our capital investments here in the town, and the debt service goes to paying the piper on those particular expenses. Moving on to the town side of things, the actual general government fund. What's the percentage on that? 4%? 7%. 7% is the unlabeled little chunk there in that wheel. Public safety, which includes the fire department as well as the police, at 11%. Public works at 6%. And we have one more little thing there, which is committees and commissions. We do provide some funding for our committees and commissions, and that would be that little sliver there. Okay, so let's move on to taking a look at, we're going to start the journey of your tax dollar. So let's get your dollar up on the slide there. Right there, that is your dollar. And we're going to take a look as it goes over towards the assessor. So at the moment, I'd like to call in Eric Henderson, our Director of Assessing. He can come up and sort of walk you through the assessing process and the assessing office. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you very much, John. My name is Eric Henderson. I'm the Director of Assessing here for the town of Natick. I've been in this field for almost 25 years now, which is a little bit scary, and the beginning of my career was more on the appraisal side. So I've been in 13 different states and I believe over 70 communities helping them with their assessed values. I took the job here in Natick about 8 or 9 years ago, but I was also the consultant here for Natick about 20 years ago. So to a certain extent I've been here a while, but to a certain extent I've also been here about 20 years. So, step one in assessing. The tax rate is essentially, and we're going to get to this in another couple of slides, we're going to go into this. We do many things, and a lot of which really derives the revenues that the town needs to operate. The first thing we do is real estate, and that's really the biggest picture of what we do, so I'm going to touch base on some of the other things first. So we tax motor vehicle excise. Everybody knows, everyone's gotten that bill. A couple of things about motor vehicle excise. If anyone's bought a new vehicle, they might be shocked at that motor vehicle excise bill. Motor vehicle excise is essentially run through the RMV and provided to us, and then we send those bills out to the community and vehicle owners. And the way excise works is a new vehicle is assessed at 90% of its manufacturer's sticker price. And then that goes down to 60%, 40%, 25%, and 10%. So that's why that new vehicle gets such a huge bill, and I promise it will go down. To a certain extent, you could have a 1968 Porsche, which is extremely, extremely valuable, and you probably have about a $6 excise bill because that sticker price in 1968 was not very high. One other thing that, is good to know for people is if you've ever looked at the back of your motor vehicle excise tax bill, which I worked in assessor's offices for 13, 14 years and never did. And I then realized when I actually started working full-time in one that I think the city of Newton still owes me $10 from a decade ago. So what happens is when we send all those bills out in February, and that's basically over 36,000 bills, about 32,000 of those go out in the big mass mailing in February. We generate about $6.8 million of revenue in motor vehicle excise taxes. That February bill's for the whole year. So if you sell your vehicle in July, anyone that's done that and bought a new vehicle knows we're going to get you on that new car. Come see us about the old car because we owe you a refund. And again, that's something that's on the back of your bill and guilty as charged. I never even looked at the thing. So something to be aware of. We also do boat excise tax, which is a real revenue driver for communities on the Cape. Oh, it is not much of a revenue driver for us. We generally pull in about $3,000 a year of boat excise taxes. Personal property taxes is another tax that we do, and I consider this the bane of the assessors. But what business personal property tax is businesses pay taxes on their stuff. Equipment, machinery, chairs, Eversource on their natural gas lines, National Grid with their wires. So that is actually a pretty good revenue driver for us, and it's something that based on how the business is set up determines whether they pay a corporate tax on that equipment or whether we're allowed to tax it locally. Let's talk about real estate. I think this is probably one of the more exciting topics out there because what we've seen here with our real estate values has been explosive to say the least. And essentially, we have to value all properties in the community at fair market value. These rules were set when Prop 2.5 was passed. So a lot of what we do in our office is really based on Department of Revenue regulations and guidelines. And to a certain extent, that is what the rules that we have to follow, whether we like them or not. What happens is every year the DOR is reviewing our data to make sure we're assessing property fairly and equitably and at market value, and they need to approve our values or we cannot send tax bills. Every 5th year, the Department of Revenue comes in and really does a full, thorough audit of our values, of our data to make sure we're doing a good job. The biggest thing with valuation and the biggest goal of the assessor, in my opinion, is fairness and equity. I think the old idea of the assessor is the tax guy showing up and we want to raise that value and we're generating revenue and et cetera. I say it like this. We're actually revenue neutral, at least in the state of Massachusetts, because of Prop 2.5. So the next slide we'll talk about this a little bit further, but to a certain extent, we truly want to assess each property fairly and equitably, and then in turn, you are paying a fair amount of taxes. So fair and equitable, it's easy words to say. What does that mean? How do we do this? So we do a lot statistically. So we look at sales for commercial properties, we look at income data and expense data and vacancy ratios. And what we do is we look at ranches versus capes versus colonials. Are we too high on colonials? Are we too low on capes? We look at different parts of town. We look at single families versus two families. We look at small lots versus big lots. And an important one is we look at, say, high-valued properties versus low-valued properties. We want to make sure that we are not overtaxing one piece or undertaxing one piece. And again, the goal at the end of the day is fairness and equity. A shocking number, and our FY25 values actually just got approved on Friday. We are over $12 billion of taxable value. That is over doubled from 10 years ago. And again, I was doing your values 10 years ago, and shocking, absolutely remarkable. What has happened with our values. And again, we don't have a lot of choice in the matter, and we don't have a lot of control on this. But as the assessor, our assessed values do have to reflect market value. So again, I always try to say in this, if anyone has a question on their tax bill, we're about as open door policy as I think as any office you will ever see. And you don't have to wait to get your tax bill to say, hey, am I being assessed correctly? You can do that any time of year, and we have a staff that is more than willing to come out, check out your property, talk with you, figure some things out. So while we're on this subject, let's talk a couple of other things. So one of the big things our office does is permits and permit inspection. And what we do is we then calculate new growth from that permit and permit activity. And new growth, I don't know how much we touch on this in the budget part later, but new growth, the theory behind new growth, you have a new house, you have new kids in the school, the town should be able to go above and beyond Prop 2.5 to a certain extent to pay for those expenses. So new growth is one of the things that we have people in the field actively, we're working with the building department to make sure we're capturing that. The other funny thing I always say, and AI may be doing the valuation here in 5 to 10 years, there's no doubt in my mind about that. And we all have seen Zillow and Redfin, which are actually getting pretty good these days. Zillow and Redfin are relying on your local assessor's data. So we do data dumps every year, every assessor's office in the state of Massachusetts, and it's that public record data that Redfin and Zillow and whatnot are modeling on. So it is really our feet on the ground that are out there measuring that new house or adding on that new addition or adding on that new deck or adjusting the condition because of that kitchen remodel. That is the data that then, a lot of the private world and a lot of the other things out there rely on. Oh, let's see. We do field review and cyclical inspection processes. So per the state of Massachusetts, we try to visit every property every 10 years. So occasionally we do mass mailings where we say, hey, we're out in the field. Can you let us into your house? We measure the outside of the house, verify the data, the information. Again, we're not out there attempting to raise revenues. And I've always said this, and I don't know if I'm believed all the time. A lot of the changes we make, lower values. And that's 100% okay with us. If you have an avocado green 1960 kitchen, our assessment may be a little bit too low, because while that kitchen works perfectly well and functions well, there is a market condition there where probably the next owner will need to remodel that kitchen. So again, fairness, equity, accuracy is really what we are looking for. Okay, let's talk about setting the tax rate, and then I think we're going to talk about one of the things we try to focus on the most in my office. So, tax rate is complicated yet simple. So really is easy. Essentially, the tax rate is the tax levy. What does the town need to raise through real estate and personal property taxes divided by the assessed values, and that equals a tax rate. So for the last good number of years, I have had to, based on the market, raised values and raised values and raised values. And the tax rate, balance beam, tax rate goes down. Taxes, unfortunately, go up. Why? Budget goes up. So it has been a long time since I've done this, but if the market were to go down, I promise I will lower everyone's values. But what happens in that scenario? The town still needs that money to survive and run. So the tax rate goes up, and in a nutshell, taxes to a certain extent do go up. My favorite example is if the market absolutely crashed overnight and I had to lower every single value in the town, our current tax rate of $12.26 per thousand would be doubled, and it would be $24.52, and everyone would have the same exact tax bill even though the values were 50%. So it's a little bit of a misnomer that raising values equals increased taxes. So again, $12.26 is our tax rate. $25 tax rate on the motor vehicle excise, and we already discussed how the valuation of that works. To a certain extent, there is a division of powers in the finance department. So we as assessors commit those taxes over to the collector's office, which then mails the bills and collects the taxes. Again, you have your division of powers because you shouldn't be assessing and collecting the taxes as one entity. One of my favorite, and we have a great staff. Ann Hansberry is my assistant assessor, who is absolutely amazing in this, is working with folks through our exemption program. So exemptions are available for blind individuals, disabled veterans, low income and asset senior citizens. And we, to a certain extent, many of these programs are based on state laws. We've been very proactive at town meeting for 20 plus years, modifying these programs within the parameters of the laws to increase the awards and try to allow more people to qualify for these exemptions. So I always tell people, if you are in a situation having a tough time paying your taxes, if you are in a situation even with a neighbor that's struggling, please reach out to our office. There are some programs that many more people would qualify maybe than they would think. To a certain extent, there are some rather low income and asset thresholds on some of our exemptions, but we voted recently at town meeting to apply COLA adjustments to those in an attempt to keep up with inflation. And we also have a tax deferral program. So we talked about how our values have over doubled in 10 years. What a tax deferral program is, and it doesn't work everywhere, but it probably works pretty well here, where if you're a senior over 65 years old and your income is less than $69,000. So that number is based on the state circuit breaker tax credit. And this is something that we have now indexed to this circuit breaker tax credit, because that is, again, adjusted for inflation. What a tax deferral is you don't pay your taxes. The taxes are then paid back when the house sells. The reason we consider this a really good program, especially for seniors on fixed incomes, is that house might have been paid off 10 years ago, and it might have been purchased at $80,000, and now it's worth $800,000. And that equity is not helping that, struggling person pay their bills. That equity is really not doing them any good. And so what the deferral program, to a certain extent, utilizes that equity to pay everyday bills. Real estate taxes are generally the highest bill that a senior may have. And I would also say that we've seen situations where reverse mortgages, for example, if you're ever in that situation thinking about it, please think about this other option. We've taken votes to both increase the income threshold and lower the interest rate. So the interest rate on this is 2%, which was a really good number a couple years ago and is an absolutely amazing number right now in this interest rate market. So again, it's a good program. I think we've got a good website out there. There's a great article in the Boston Globe from about 10 years ago that's titled something like "The Best Program Around That No One Knows About." So anytime you hear me talk, you hear me kind of discuss these type of things. So I just, ask people out there, always can kind of drive that traffic and give us a call, send us an email, check out our website, and open the lines of communication. Yes, sir.
Quick question. The Prop 2.5
Yep.
cap? Do you mind put the remote on? Oh, thank you. So just a quick question.
Yeah.
For the Prop 2.5 cap, does that apply to the tax rate or the tax levy?
That's an excellent question. So the Prop 2.5, and I've gotten this one a million times. Hey, my taxes went up more than 2.5%. Yes, they did. So Prop 2.5 cap applies to the levy, to the overall budget. It really doesn't have any applicability to an individual tax bill. And the way it works, again, I've been in 13 different states. Most states are on 5-year cycles. I used to do revaluations in Pennsylvania where they hadn't done one since the 1950s. So then when you came in and actually valued at market value, there was significant shifts from one type of property to another, etc. Massachusetts, we're basically doing this on an annual basis so that we can really keep up with the market so that we don't see real crazy shifts of tax burden. So it works very well. And again, Prop 2.5 is a pretty good taxpayer protection mechanism in the state of Massachusetts that doesn't exist elsewhere, I will add. I think I'm out of assessing stuff. Does that make sense? I guess we're going to turn it back over to John. I'm more than happy to answer some assessing questions later in the portion of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Henderson will be staying with us throughout the program. So at the end of the presentation, 30 minutes, if you come up with some more assessing questions, he'll be happy to answer them. So we're at the stage of our little journey of our tax dollar here. We've heard from how they're assessed and actually the tax rate is set. And we're moving on next to the collector treasurer's office where, as you sort of heard, the collector mails out the tax bills to all of you wonderful residents in the town, and you have to pay that. So let's click on that and start with the collector treasurer's office. First off, you might want to say, well, why is this called collector treasurer? Can't you make up your mind? Shouldn't it just be one or the other? Don't understand that. It actually used to be two. The fact of the matter is, it used to be collector, elected, treasurer, elected. That's quite a while ago, actually, a little even before my time. However, at some particular point in time, they realized that didn't make a lot of sense, and also with regards to just your workflows and your just the ability to do the job didn't make it much sense at all either. Obviously, we have internal controls because you don't want to have the person who's collecting your money depositing it in the bank as well. So there are those particular controls within the office itself, but the collector treasurer is one particular person, has a staff of 5 individuals who handle all of the collector and treasurer functionality for the town. So first of all, tax bill processing. I'm going to get into a little bit about the collection of the tax bills in the next slide, but that's sort of the first primary objective. Of course, as we noted, the tax levy real estate portion of that is our primary revenue source for the town, and important that we get those processed so we have that revenue for the town. But we also collect other revenues as well in the collector treasurer's office. First of all, there's state and federal grants. All money, either reimbursement or direct grants from the federal or state government, come into the collector treasurer's office. Departmental permits, license, and fees. Various town departments have those particular types of revenues that are submitted to the collector's office on either a weekly or sometimes even a daily basis with turnovers in order for them to be properly accounted for. They also handle the water and sewer bills for the town. There are actually 2 individuals in the office who are actually part of the water and sewer enterprise fund because they pretty much spend all their time working on the water and sewer bills. And then finally, the parking meter receipts and ticketing fines. If you get a parking ticket in the town of Natick, you do need to pay that at the collector treasurer's office. Also, the collector treasurer is also the parking clerk. So if you don't like that particular fine, she's actually the one who has the hearing with regards to your need to pay that. So that's basically the collector side of the collector treasurer's office. Now moving over to the right hand side of the slide, you have the treasurer side. So once you collect the money, it is turned over to the treasurer, actually in this particular case the assistant treasurer, who basically maintains the cash book. The cash book is a statutorily required list of all receipts for the town. And then, of course, the money is deposited by the staff into the bank accounts, it's scanned in, and the assistant treasurer then reconciles that against the cash book, and then that particular record is then turned over to the comptroller's office. Talk about a little bit about that later in order for it to be reconciled in the general ledger. And then finally, investments. We're a very sort of cyclical town with regards to our revenues coming in. Once we send out those bills, we have a large influx of money, as opposed to other times that it's not quite so fast. So we have times in that we do need to invest our money to make certain that we do make the money work for the residents, even when we don't need it to actually pay bills. So we do, the treasurer is responsible for making sure that money is invested not only on daily rates for the operating funds, but also she's the caretaker of the trust funds for the town. So that's more long-term investments that she works on actually with myself. To make sure those are appropriately invested. So moving on to the collection procedures. So first off, we talked about how the bill is actually sent out. And one thing to sort of remember, what the law actually says with regards to your tax bill is you actually don't need to receive a tax bill in order to be liable for that tax. If you don't receive the bill, you still have to pay it. Now, you can probably get away without having to pay interest on it, but at the end of the day, you are liable for those taxes, even if you did not receive a bill. We just went through, Mr. Henderson, with how those bills are calculated, and then we have to proceed to payment. Now, we try to make certain to make this as easy as possible. Once again, people don't particularly appreciate paying taxes, so therefore we do have several ways to do that. First of all is mail-in check. One little plea to you folks, please do not use those bank checks. Unfortunately, they're very hard for the staff to read. They sometimes don't put the account number on them, and it's just oftentimes a little bit difficult to do that. So we don't really like that. Personal checks, that's great. Window service, you can come up to the window and pay cash. If you like, we do not accept credit cards through the window, but we do accept cash or checks through the windows. Online payments, which are our favorite, go to Unibank. You can get to click the link on the Collector Treasurer's website and pay directly on there. And then finally, oftentimes your mortgage company processes your taxes for you. They're handled by companies such as ACI or CoreLogic. They handle just hundreds of these things. We get a large file, which is then downloaded into our accounts. So I just want to touch briefly on what happens if you don't pay. Unfortunately, this is the not so fun part of the presentation, but it's important that you do sort of know what the sort of triggers are here. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with regards to tax title or those sort of things. But first of all, if you don't pay, usually after, depends on the particular type of bill, 30 days, you will receive a demand notice. With regards to excise tax that Mr. Henderson talked about, it is pink. And when those pink notices go out, we hear about it because people do not like pink notices. They'll call us up and ask about it. And of course, we explain the process to them, but that's the first sort of note that goes out. With regards to your real estate taxes, we are a quarterly real estate tax bill town, so your bills go out on a quarterly basis. Now, according to the law, the entire taxes aren't due until the actual last bill actually goes out and the 30 days passes. So interest, of course, does accrue if you don't pay your other bills. That would be actually at 8% now. Their statutory interest just went down recently to 8%, but that is accrued. But you don't receive a demand notice until 30 days after your last bill is actually sent out and received by you, and that would basically start the tax title process. Now, interest and penalties are sort of assessed here. I'll talk a little bit about the interest, but penalties as well. If you've ever been late on those excise tax bills, you can see that the fees actually go up significantly. I think it's $29 in the various notice fees that you get from the deputy collectors with regards to that, as well as the interest. And of course, if you don't pay those, they tag your license at the registry, and you will pay them eventually when you actually try to go renew your license. And then finally, a lien will attach to your house after a certain number of days with regards to if you do not pay your taxes, your real estate taxes. And then finally, in tax title, you can foreclose on your house. Now, once again, not exactly happy tidings for folks, difficult to talk about for people. However, the one thing that you should, of course, be aware of is that, we're going to talk about this in just a little bit, of our collection rates with regards to our taxes are pretty close to 99%. So people here do pay their taxes, which is really good. But also, as you probably know, I mentioned a little bit about debt service. We do go out to borrow a lot of money with regards to our capital projects. Now, when you go out to borrow money, one of the questions they, of course, ask you is, what is your collection rate? Now, technically, our collection rate actually is 100%. We will collect everything eventually. Even something that goes into tax title, it might take several years, it might be deferred taxes. We will always collect everything. And when you have a collection rate of 100%, that is what people who loan you money actually like a lot. So it helps out a lot that we have the ability to collect our revenues in a timely fashion with regards to making certain that we can borrow money at a good rate. All right, so go on to the next slide of the Collector Treasurer's Office. Collector Treasurer's Office is a very busy office. I just wanted to give you a couple of stats with regards to this. Total number of bills processed. This is for FY24, right? Yes, 134,923. That's processed by 6 people in office. Unfortunately, it's actually gone down as low as 4 because we have a hard time hiring people. So the volume with regards to how many people we actually have in office is very high. Once again, I mentioned the tax levy collection rate is 99.1%. That's up, I think, is that up 2% from last year? 0.5, oh, sorry, right at the top. I should read my own slide. 0.5% up from last year. Once again, a very high rate of collections, which is good. We do encourage people, of course, to call us, and they actually follow that advice and call the Collector Treasurer's Office actually quite a bit. So for the calls in the past 12 months, 8,810. We receive about 35 phone calls per day with regards to taxes. Okay, so head back up to there. We've sort of gone through assessing and collecting it. Now we're going to go into a little bit about the planning and how we sort of present the budget and the revenues for appropriation by town meeting. So this, of course, does come from the Finance Administration and Budget Office, which, of course, as I mentioned previously, is myself, Tian, and Gloria. Just a little bit about what we do. We do municipal debt issuance. As I mentioned, we do use a lot of debt with regards to our capital projects, and we're the ones that process the paperwork with regards to that and set up the modeling and scenarios with regards to how we use our debt. And then, of course, goes towards our capital finance. We work with the Deputy Town Administrator of Operations, John Marshall, with regards to financing the capital projects of the town, financial planning and management. We do quarterly presentations to the Select Board with regards to, okay, we've got that both twice up there, and management. And then, of course, we do our financial indicators and forecasts. We usually do that in August or early September. And that actually kicks off the unofficial or official budget season for the town and our development of our budget. Now, just before I get to that, 2 other things that we're involved in is, first of all, our audit. Along with the comptroller, we work on getting the documentation to our auditors and then going over it with them, and also representing administration in front of the Audit Advisory Committee. And then finally, policies, procedures, and manuals, where the upkeep and drafting of those particular things fall under our office. But the big item, of course, is the budget. And I actually have a whole slide on that, so we'll sort of save that for a little bit later. Just a couple of notes here with regards to our credit rating. It is AAA stable, has been updated by Standard & Poor's in June of 2023 and Fitch in June of 2024. We have had 4 consecutive years of the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Award for Excellence in Budgeting. So let's go on up onto the budget. The budget, of course, is the I'd say the main event of the town, something which we spend a lot of time on here. If you have any questions or any interest in what goes on financially in the town, I would recommend that you actually go onto our website and take a look at the budget. It has a lot of information in there, not just regarding the budget, but also the financial conditions of the town, as well as what the various departments, what services they're providing, what they're up to. So usually, as I sort of mentioned previously with regards to the forecasting, we do start the budget preparations in September, where with the revenue forecast, we do set those general sort of parameters for the budget. In October, which we're working on currently, we work on our level services budget baseline. Usually what we use is our previous year plus contractual increases that we had or other additional expenses that the departments have sort of identified to us in order to set our baseline for the budgets. Towards the end of October, or hopefully mid-October this time around, we will open up the files to the department heads. We use a software called ClearGov, which provides online access to the department heads for their budgets, as well as the finance committee when they're reviewing the budgets, to take a look at the numbers with regards to each departmental budget. November through December, the finance department sits down with the department heads and goes over their goals and new initiatives for the upcoming year, works with them at putting their budget together, and then finally towards the end of December, we actually meet with the department heads, the town administrator and the finance department to go over and finalize their budget before we start putting it together in January and February. How are we doing time-wise? 46 minutes, okay, about right on time. January and February, we're trying to finalize our budget numbers for the school and the town to create our budget book. One quick note with regards to the school's budget. By statute, the schools actually produce their own budget that needs to be funded by the town, and that is approved by the school committee. But we do work closely with the finance department in the schools to make certain that we're all on the same wavelength with regards to what revenues are available for spending by the town. February 1st is the date which we do have to submit the town administrator's budget, and then February, usually mid-February, the Finance Committee starts its review of the budget document, having their hearings, their subcommittee hearings, and basically making their decisions on how they're going to recommend or not recommend particular budget items to town meeting. And then finally the main event. And then also we usually update our budget book in April based upon input from the finance committee, the select board, and from the public, because we usually have some hearings with regards to getting public input on the budget. So finally we update that in April, early April, and then mid-April, of course, is town meeting time, and town meeting then considers and votes to appropriate the next year's budget for the town. Okay, so we got we do have particular resources if you'd like to get a little more involved with regards to finding out how your tax dollars actually sort of fits into the budget. Using, once again, the software ClearGov. They have a transparency website set up for the town, and you can actually go on there and plug in your tax dollars there, and actually will provide you with a breakdown with regards to how it's allocated in the budget. Education and learning, I can't read this, shared expenses and public safety, just a couple of items there, but it breaks down those particular budget items in case you're interested as to where your final dollars actually end up. So moving on, our last stop here, of course, is the comptroller's office. The comptroller, of course, is primarily known for, once you click on the comptroller's slide there, they're doing the upkeep and maintenance of the general ledger. However, they actually do a number of other different items. First of all, with regards to spending, they do operate the accounts payable function. Purchasing actually is a separate thing outside of the comptroller's office, but they're the ones who issue the POs, make sure that the purchases are appropriate and legal under law. They also administer the payroll for both the town and for the school. They're the monthly monitors of the budget for the departments. They send out the departments a report every month with regards to how they're doing on their spending of the budget, and give them a little call if it's not quite in line with what it should be. And then finally, audit compliance. They work with the Director of Finance to provide the documentation to the auditors and going over the basic responses of the auditor when the audit is completed. So Michelle Laramie is the comptroller for the town. They have 6 people in their office. That handles payroll, AP, and of course the general ledger functions. There's a couple of stats here. Payroll. We run both the payroll for the school and the town. They're on every other week. We do direct deposits for people. We don't actually provide hard checks for them. Payrolls usually have about 1,764 staff per payroll. Number of invoices processed, 23,749. We actually buy a lot of stuff here. Actual spending that's represented in the budget, they spend 98% of their budget. And the number of vendors they pay, 3,782. A lot of work there for the comptroller's office. Thomas Mewey is the AP person there, the staff accountant. It does all that. Now, as I promised, we do want to provide you with some numbers with regards to the town. Wouldn't be a finance presentation unless we gave you some numbers. As I sort of general revenues, 79.4 million of major revenue sources of tax levy, state aid, and local receipts, the top three areas. Just right over to local receipts. As I sort of mentioned previously, local receipts are important, not just for the revenue they bring in, but also an indication of how the town is doing from an economic point of view. Motor vehicle excise tax was up 10% for FY24. I don't know who's buying all those cars out there, but please continue to do so. We're doing very well on that. $6,644,647 in motor vehicle excise tax, far exceeding what our expectations were for those particular taxes. Other excise tax, hotel, motel, meals, and cannabis, also up 9.5%, which is also a bit of a surprise. People are evidently buying new cars and then going out to eat, which is fabulous for us. $2,782,620. Also, just a little note with regards to cannabis. We are finally seeing some revenue from cannabis. I believe it's $91,437. A little bit below what our expectations were in that area, but we do feel that that is a growth area in the near-term future. The golf course, this was actually the first year that the golf course operated without a subsidy, and they actually did extremely well, which is always good to hear. Water and sewer fund revenues surpassed the average for FY21 for 23 by 12%, which is good. That is totally user fee funded. Spending highlights improvements in filling vacancies, leads to a notable increase in staffing levels, which is good news for us. Coming out of COVID, we unfortunately had a very hard time hiring staff, and especially in public safety as well as the finance department. We just couldn't get any bodies in the door. We're seeing a little bit of an uptick with regards to that, getting our vacancies filled. So therefore, at 97%, of course, what this means is that we're probably going to see a little bit of a smaller free cash numbers because we don't have that turn back from our departments. But that is a good thing to see that we're finally getting back to more normal levels of staffing. And then finally, the general expenditures, actual versus budget, 98.76%. Once again, a good number that we do like to see the departments are spending their monies and doing a good forecast with regards to their costs for the year. And so just like to say, finalize here, please stay connected with us. Like I said, mentioned, we do provide a lot of fiscal year budget documentation. They're available on our website. The town does produce an annual report. If you'd like to see in one easy space what people make in the town, that's a good place to look. Quarterly financial reports provided to the select board. They're also available on our website. Annual financial indicators analysis and multi-year forecasts. We do that every August and September. That's also available. And then finally, we do have a financial dashboard that is that real time? No. Okay. Updated frequently. It's also available on our website. And then, of course, there is the town administrator's budget book. It's both available electronically as well as a hard copy should you so choose. So I think at this particular point in time, right about on time, that concludes our remarks. Thank you very much for sitting through this and listening to us. If you have any questions, or for myself, Mr. Henderson, Tien, or Gloria, by all means, let us know.
Yeah, hi. Question about the how does the school district budget integrate with the overall budget? So it sounds like it's integrated and they vote up and down for like the whole thing, everything combined. I guess along with that, like you accounted for revenue from like water and sewer and excise tax, but there are some fees paid to the school, like the Chromebook, the bus fee, and whatnot. I'm assuming that probably doesn't even cover the costs of whatever they're providing there. I guess how does that integrate? And then like what would prevent like the school budget from asking, well, we want a 50% increase, and that's like wipe out, go way past your 2.5%, and then cause the other departments to have to go down. That would be extreme. So hopefully that never happens. But I guess how does that actually work?
Yeah. So how it actually works is that, we say we do work very closely with the school department and the school finance department as well. Generally speaking, what we do is when we do our initial sort of budget, we do have conversations with the school just to let them know what our overall sort of revenues look like for the year coming up. So they have an idea about what is available from the town. Generally speaking, through January, we have a large number of meetings with them that sort of go through and try to decide how it is that we do need to apportion things. And, recently, we've been able to reach an agreement with regards to the number. In the past, not so much. We have a gap, and we work with them to sometimes right up to town meeting to make sure we have a balanced budget. We do have to submit a balanced budget to town meeting. We can't have any sort of gaps here. So we work with them, and in my tenure here, we've always been able to reach agreement with regards to what is necessary to operate the schools and also keep the town running as well. With regards to the other items, a lot of things that they charge for are like either special accounts or revolving accounts that the fees go directly into those accounts to fund that sort of those activities. With regards to transportation, the town does provide a separate category with regards to bus transportation. I think it's $127,000. Close. $430,000, about that. That sort of goes to subsidize the fees that are collected from the parents with regards to the transportation. Yeah. Do we have any questions from you two, Len?
We have a question online. How are we doing with the funding of our OPEB liability?
Wonderful. No. So, good question. I think if any of you listened to me at town meeting, love to talk about OPEB, other post-employment benefits. These are basically the health care costs for our seniors who have retired from the town. This is very important that we do meet those obligations. This is very similar to what happened with the pensions, and that this was a benefit that was given to retirees, but for years, nobody sort of took into account the future liabilities here. So much like the pension, I think the total liability now is $184,000 million. Yes, a very large amount of money. So what we've been doing, we haven't been meeting our obligations with regards to the pension liability, and we are on the 30-year plan, which actually will conclude in 2030. And the plan has always been, and is actually part of the select board's management principles, that once we get done with our pension liability, we will start working on the OPEB liability as well. Now, we have consistently throughout the past at least 5 or 6 years always set a little bit aside with regards to OPEB. One of the things that the rating agencies look at is how committed you are to. We're not going to pay obviously putting $250,000 into an account for a $180 million debt is going to take us forever to do it, but they want to see the commitment to paying that. We set up a trust fund, we're funding it, and hopefully we'll start paying significant amounts of money into that trust fund in 2030 once we meet our pension liabilities. Now, I don't think anybody really expects us to put $184 million into an account and let it sit there. That's not really the idea of it. Once we start getting a little closer to this, then we will, of course, sit down with our financial advisors and work out what it does, what is necessary basically to fund our what we call the pay-go, the actual annual amounts with regards to that particular benefit, and set that aside, and hopefully the benefits, the revenue derived from that will pay for that going forward. So that's the general idea. Are working on it, take it very seriously, and hoping in 2030 we'll get to actually funding it. Thank you for the question. Anything else? No? Oh, yep.
Thank you. I'm just wondering how the infrastructure, like roads construction, water line, pipes, what is the budget? I couldn't identify which bucket of the different expenses belong to this.
Good question. Actually, you have 2 questions embedded in that. First of all, the roads and sidewalks, which is a capital project of the town. The pipes and the sewer lines is actually capital projects of the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund that is funded by your fees that you pay, when you turn on the faucet and flush the toilet. Those fees you pay, that goes to fund those particular items. Now, the capital side of things is actually a separate budget that is handled by the Deputy Town Administrator for Operations. It's a 5-year plan that they update. I think it's every year, it's every September. I think they also update it with regards to what needs to be done. It's a big laundry list of things. They sit down with the various departments. Obviously, DPW and the facilities departments are very involved in this, trying to sort of prioritize what it is that needs to be done most. And then at that particular point in time, we do have a capital stabilization fund, which we put money into. We use that to provide some services from the capital side of things, but a lot of it we do borrow. So once they sort of say, geez, these are the particular projects that do need to go forward, filling these potholes, improve these roads, putting in new sidewalks, whatever it is, and put a package together. And then we sit down with John Marshall, Gloria, and myself, and we talk about how we're going to sort of fund this, whether we can do some of this out of our cap stabilization funds, or do we need to go out and borrow the money. Generally speaking, we borrow money twice a year. We do a short-term bond anticipatory note in December, and what that is basically is that these are projects that we need to do immediately, so we need money. It's a short-term note, and then in the springtime we do another group of projects that need to be done. Hopefully the other ones have been sort of started, and we take those, and the town meeting appropriates the money for that. And then in June, July, we actually do a bond issue, and that's we fund these with municipal bonds. We get good rates on that. The current rate is probably about 3.5%, because they're tax exempt for the people that buy these bonds. And that's how we fund most of our capital. But with regards to the budget itself, it is a separate sort of item. It's not actually part of the operational budget, which we talked about this evening.
Thank you.
Maybe, John, you can just mention briefly about the operating versus capital budgets, because they're fairly significantly different numbers as volume, and maybe just talk through some of that.
Sure. Like you sort of saw the numbers with regards to the operating side of things. I don't know. Honestly, don't really know how much the capital budget is.
I happen to know 4.6 million.
4.6 million
for 24.
Right. Yeah. So,
Very big differences when you start asking questions about capital. It's a fraction of the operating side.
here's your opportunity. Captive audience.
I guess one question is, are there any pilot payment in lieu of taxes programs that we have?
Good question. So Natick hasn't historically had a lot of pilots, but we had a good number of them before COVID. When COVID sort of hit, generally speaking, we didn't sort of push the issue because a lot of people are very struggling with regards to their pilot payments. So they sort of, I'd say went away, but a lot of just held in abeyance until financially they could get started on them again. So we have seen an increase in pilots, which is a good sign. Unfortunately, of course, our biggest pilot did come from the hospital, which is no longer there. But generally speaking, I don't know how many. Do you know?
Oh, not very many. So we have TCAN has a pilot, which was voted at town meeting many moons ago. We have a couple of solar pilots. So what happens with solar, when it's a real commercial solar development, the developers actually like pilots and request pilots. And the law changed a couple of years ago to make it a little bit more flexible for us to do that. They like the pilots because it gives them a set schedule and they can build that into their pricing mechanisms. We have a pretty small pilot with Natick Housing Authority, which is kind of quasi-governmental and a little bit gray area in the law. And yes, Marianne Morris, the nursing home, behind the hospital, has a pilot. In the late 90s, I was involved with a few of these. There was a little bit of a question of taxable status of some of these nursing homes, and actually, there's many of them at the state that were at court, and the parties at that point in time said, "Let's not waste all our money on lawyers and whatnot," and they came up with pilot agreements that both parties kind of figured out, and it made sense for everyone. So we are not, Boston. You hear a lot of talk with Boston and the hospitals and the colleges that are buying up a lot of property and really paying limited taxes, if any. Not really a major situation here, thankfully.
Is there any valuation of assets? Like, do we know what are the assets of the town, and are they going up? Presumably, does it?
Well, let's see. So we do value exempt real estate. We don't pay a lot of attention to it because they don't pay any taxes. But essentially, our municipal-owned properties are valued on the same land models as the commercial property next door or whatnot, and the buildings are valued on a cost approach to a certain extent, rather than a market approach, because I don't know what a town hall would sell for. I believe, do we have inventory tracking of some sort?
We do maintain an inventory of our capital assets with regards to the value on it. It was noted in our audit this last time around. I'm not really certain whether it's substantially changed any in the last couple of years or not.
And last one I can think of right now. What happens when there's new development in town, and is that a net positive or a net negative? Like, say there's a house and there's a tear down, and then they build a new house that's more expensive. Is that a net positive for the town? And then similar situation, what if there's an empty field somewhere, and they build a single family home as opposed to a multifamily home? Is that also a net positive or a net negative?
Good question. So I'll start with the valuation standpoint. So that is what drives new growth, and in Prop 2.5, new growth is one of those gives us a little bit buffer in our budgets annually, and has allowed us to, to a certain extent, try to avoid an override. So we've really seen a lot of new growth. The last couple of years have been absolutely remarkable in new growth, and I think as you drive around, we see a lot of concrete that is now framed up, and it's not there yet, but I think we have some future growth coming. Big picture standpoint, the question is, where's your growth coming from? I mean, I think if you look at our overall budget, if that new growth is putting a lot of children in the schools, again, as an assessor, we don't care. You build it, we will tax it. But to a certain extent, it all depends on whether it's an ad or whether it is a neutral to a certain extent. But yes, when a house gets torn down and the new one gets built, that house at $600,000 is now assessed at 2.2 or 1.8 or 1.5 these days. So that is something that we are very, very actively trying to keep up with. That answers that question. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for your time this evening.
Thank you. Nothing, Linda? No? Okay. Thank you.
Brill, the finance director. This is everyone's opportunity.
She's had plenty of opportunity to do that. Nothing from anybody in U2 land? Okay. Great. Thank you very much for participating. See you next time.
Natick 102.